Bridgerton, the TV series, came out on Netflix Christmas of 2020. During a time when the options were rewatching Tiger King or spiraling into hopeless despair, Bridgerton provided a country of shut-ins something lighter to engage with, a world of flowery gowns, pretty diamonds, and gorgeous dukes. I, like just about everyone else, gave it a go and enjoyed the story. And with the release of the fourth season in January, I decided to rewatch the series so I could remember all the things that I'd forgotten. But I'm not the same person I was when I first watched Bridgerton in 2020, and I've noticed some things that I'd glazed over in my quest for catharsis. In a 2026 world where things are heavier and deadlier than ever, the pretty show has lost some of its luster for me, and I've begun to notice the overall pettiness and tedium the idle rich suffuse themselves in within the world of Bridgerton. All of it has begun to feel performative. The shiny and beautiful world of Mayfair now feels vapid and empty. Who cares about social standing right now? War is imminent. Water bankruptcy is both new and irreversible. The poles are melting. And those ornate dresses can no longer cover up the constant performance of the denizens of London's marriage season. Maybe it's my own growth as a person that makes Bridgerton less fun. Maybe it's reckoning with my own transness. Maybe it's the realities of a world where the actions and inactions of the idle rich are touching me and mine far too closely at all times. Maybe it's all of the above. And maybe that's why I left the end of my Bridgerton rewatch feeling lied to. Not because the earnestness of the story was false, but because the common thread of the story is deceit. Mayfair's society is fragile and full of liars.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players.
Jacques, the melancholy traveler in As You Like It, first spoke those words in 1599. The words have since been divorced from their full context, but the phrase rings true even now over 400 years later. I'm non-binary, and this helped me clock the constant performance of gender very early, even if I didn't have the words to articulate that understanding as a kid. As I've gotten older, though, I've come to find that the overwhelming majority of the way that humans interact and relate to one another is based on performance, not necessarily authenticity. And Bridgerton is the perfect example of this phenomenon. We meet the Bridgerton family for the first time during the start of the London season, the day Daphne is set to debut. That is, present herself in front of the queen and signal that she's of the age to marry. What follows is a typical tropey fake dating story. The leads of the story are cute and have chemistry, and they uphold the narrative of performing for society on stable shoulders. The first season is about making Daphne feel desirable to the bachelors of the marriage mart, while also making Simon look taken, so he can escape the constant pressures that being an eligible bachelor puts on him from the mamas of the ton. The two have a jocular kind of chemistry that carries the story and does eventually, inevitably, turn into love. At the beginning of each season, the viewers are introduced to the three main characters: the Bridgerton protagonist, their love interest, and society with a capital S. Daphne and Simon are the main actors in season 1, but the main viewer in the canon of the story is society, not Lady Whistledown. She's simply the voice of society. What she represents is bigger than her actual identity. She is the result of society's existence. She points to what is proper according to the rules of society and what isn't, focusing attention and scrutiny on any and all that are out of bounds. So for the residents of Mayfair, things are done, said, glorified, or obfuscated for the sake of remaining proper or appropriate in the eyes of society. And in Lady Whistledown's papers. Throughout the seasons of the show, society is an ever-present, silent, and invisible protagonist in the story. Things are done to satiate the confines of society, hidden to escape society's ridicule and judgment, exaggerated for the sake of gaining society's favor. And society is mercurial and vindictive, never questioned and omnipotent. This third protagonist, being so deeply rooted, is never challenged by any of the characters in the story, at least not in the first 3 seasons, and certainly not critically.
This is madness.
Society being an invisible but constant audience to the people of Mayfair is just accepted as an inescapable reality. And that made me curious about what society actually means. There are multiple definitions, but one in particular stuck out to me. Definition 4, a part of the community that sets itself apart as a leisure class and that regards itself as the arbiter of fashion and manners. This seems to entirely fit the description of the third protagonist in Mayfair, the ominous, invisible, and omnipotent society that everyone seems to tiptoe around. The thing that caught my attention most heavily was the juxtaposition of the words community and society. In this definition, society is seen as a part of a community, which is a different and separate thing. And it seems to function that way in Mayfair too. Society is a nebulous and external force, but the whole of London is the community that Mayfair lords over. The rules of society both isolate the residents of Mayfair from the wider London community and dictate what is acceptable in order to maintain that distinction. That separation is what society's existence seems to depend upon. And that made me curious about who created society and for what purpose. Most of the drama in Bridgerton comes from this nebulous third protagonist, society. The problems in Mayfair are always underlined by the unspoken assumption that others are always watching and always judging harshly, no less. Everything is done for the sake of optics, that is, how things look to others and the inevitably uncharitable conclusions they'll jump to. The word optics used to refer just to the science of light, but in an increasingly politically aware world, the word has since gained a new meaning. Optics now also refers to the aspects of an action or decision that relate to the way others perceive things. That's the definition we'll be using in this video, the focus on external perception. There are similarities between the way that the people of Bridgerton and we, the audience in everyday life, interact with one another. As a whole, humanity seems to live or die by the rules of capital S society, that ever-present protagonist in our collective lives. And that begs the question, why perform? Who are we performing for? And who came up with the seemingly ironclad but always mutable rules of society's harsh gaze? One of the prime examples of society's constant presence in the real world is what we deem to be professionalism. Like the constant posturing by the people of Mayfair, being in a workplace demands that we pretend and hide and obfuscate and lie for the sake of maintaining good standing within that workplace. During the height of the COVID pandemic, there were millions of people who lost family, friends, partners, themselves, their health, their sanity. But because they were deemed essential workers, they had no choice but to be on the front lines of a worldwide pandemic and maintain a customer service smile while they did so. That is what professionalism dictates. It dictates that a deadly worldwide pandemic go from being called uncertain times to the new normal on the overburdened backs of those who have lost the most. The parallels between these experiences made me think about the way that society in Bridgerton and professionalism in the workplace operate. Both are mutable and arbitrary. Both rely on public perception and the certainty of viciously harsh judgment. And both are about maintaining a kayfabe of pleasant perfection at all costs, lest you be thrown out or shunned, deemed unworthy. Merriam-Webster defines professionalism as the skill, good judgment, and polite behavior that is expected of a person who is trained to do a job well. The phrase that stuck out to me here the most was polite behavior. Who defines polite? What's polite in Argentina is entirely different than what's polite in Hong Kong. Hell, what's polite in New York City is entirely different from what's polite in Los Angeles. What's polite on one person's side of the family may be entirely different from what's polite on their spouse's side of the family. Polite, like professionalism, like society, is mutable and arbitrary, inconsistent, and predicated on harsh judgment and vitriolic exclusion from the in-group, if not followed to the letter at all times. There's an elephant in the room that is being talked around when we talk about these unstandardized norms. There is no one specific person to whom we answer for not conforming to them. These norms vary from person to person, state to state, country to country, hell, hour by hour, and yet everyone is supposed to instinctively know and operate within those narrow confines. My point isn't that being polite is worth throwing out. All of us should move with kindness when it comes to dealing with others, just as a baseline. My point is that these standards are ever shifting, and it seems like everyone is always trying to catch up. So who sets up the goalpost? Who determines when that everyday person has caught up, has been professional enough, been polite enough, has pleased society enough? Erving Goffman wrote his book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, in 1956. It's a sociological text where Goffman relates human social interaction with the idea of the theater. In his text, Goffman defines interactions between people as being between an actor and an audience member, defines different roles as front or backstage behaviors. To put it plainly, Goffman heard Jacques' lament in As You Like It and took that shit personally. All the world's a stage, indeed. Goffman theorizes that the self is not fixed, but is a result of the way that we interact with others, and is dependent on time, place, and audience. For example, who I am around my father is somewhat different from who I am around my best friends, and is entirely different than who I am at my job. All of these selves are still me, but in a different font. And none of these choices are necessarily conscious or malicious. It's just my way of managing the way I'm seen with these people. To my father, I'm his loving adult child. To my friends, I'm a bit raucous, but always loyal and loving. To my job, an efficient and pleasant worker. All of these things are still Alex, but everyone gets different parts of me. That's impression management, a theory that was penned by Goffman. Impression management, or self-presentation, refers to the ways that people consciously or unconsciously attempt to influence the perceptions of other people, especially about themselves. Personally, I find Goffman's theory to be accurate but limited, because sure, people perform and behave in different ways when they want to elicit different opinions and outcomes from the people around them, but Goffman never actually answers why that is. In Bridgerton, the residents of Mayfair are constantly engaging in impression management. That's honestly the entire point of the show. Everyone hides or shows, lies or tells the truth, glorifies or castigates, all for the sake of appearing one specific way in society. In real life, we do this too. Sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it's on purpose, sometimes it's for good reasons, and sometimes for bad ones. But no matter what, we focus on the way we're seen and how we measure up to the norms of the situations we find ourselves in. However, falling in line with these understood expectations has a sort of or else quality to it. Stay within the bounds of society, or else. Remain professional at all times, or else. Be polite, or else. This is a performance under duress, because there is an unspoken yet horrific consequence for not falling in line, which implies that there is a power dynamic that isn't being addressed. Because if there are consequences from a human perspective, that means there are humans meting out those consequences. Maybe it's the other residents of Mayfair talking shit about you and excluding you from further interaction for not living up to the rules of society.
Light skirts.
Maybe it's the HR lady at your job telling you that your lack of professionalism is worth you being thrust into a state of unemployment without notice or recourse, scrambling to find a way to feed yourself and your children. Maybe it's the creep watching you when you're eating in a cafe who won't take no for an answer and demands that you be polite or risk deadly consequences. There is an element of these arbitrary structures that requires mindless compliance or horrific consequence. The constant performance of politeness and professionalism does become draining after a point. Every performance does. No actor acts 24/7. Even the most dedicated thespian needs a break. But living in this world dictates that we must constantly manage the way that we look to the world outside of our walls. And in an increasingly connected, smaller world with constant surveillance and constant feedback, society has quickly been brought into our homes so that we can never stop performing. We must maintain the best optics. We can never be caught slipping, lest we deal with horrific lambasting and critique of everything from bonnets in the airport to unpolished toenails at the beach. Nothing is sacred, nothing is private, and everything is either good or bad. Good is rewarded, sometimes monetarily, sometimes in social capital, sometimes in just feeling good about yourself, while bad is horrifically ridiculed and mocked, whether it deserves to be or not. Don't get me wrong, some things deserve to be shamed, but most things aren't either 100% good or 100% bad. The overwhelming majority of life happens in the gray area between those ideas. Yet, we as people in an online world are maintaining our reputations at every turn without respite for the sake of being seen as good. So it makes sense why a lot of people focus more on optics, on appeasing society, on looking good, because looking good to others feels good. In part 1, I said that I believe people should move with kindness in dealing with others. I specified kindness for a reason. I have lived on both coasts. I was raised in the Deep South, and I live on the West Coast now. The stereotype that I've heard and agree with most since moving here is that people on the East Coast are kind but not nice, while people on the West Coast are nice but not kind. I didn't understand that adage until I moved to the West Coast and saw it for myself. Kind, as a word, means there is a human, communal, connected understanding in the way that we treat one another. Nice, on the other hand, is more about optics. It's less an internal motivation and more an external one that says people are watching, smile, instead of one that says people need help, lend a hand.
Keep smiling, dearest. I'm watching you. Now more than ever.
Kind is about how you care. Nice is about how you look. This connection made me understand the people of Mayfair more fully. Society is nice, but decidedly not kind. Society is about how you look. Professionalism is about how you look. Polite is about how you look. I've noticed that people on the West Coast, and most people in general, especially online, seem to be more focused on optics, on being nice, on being polite. The focus is more on looking like a good person rather than actually being a good person. If you look like a good person, you can avoid critique or rejection. At least that's the goal. Something in me rallies against this understanding, because the world isn't just pretty dresses, handsome dukes, and rich gossip mongers. There are real problems in the world that require real answers. We cannot polite our way out of climate change. We cannot nice our way out of water bankruptcy. Society predicates upon simple solutions to complex problems. Nice kicks the can down the road without ever picking up the goddamn can. What does a kind Mayfair look like? If society is only seen as a part of community, what does actual community look like? If society is nice, what is community? I moved to the West Coast in 2021. It wasn't until a year later, through the power of Dungeons and Dragons, funnily enough, that I finally understood what it meant to be in a community. I credit one of my best friends for this. Their name is Blue, and they are the one who taught me what community actually looks like, in a time when I didn't know what it was. Granted, I'd had a community in the Deep South, but I left the South for a reason. Being on the West Coast was the first time in my life that I'd consciously taken the time to understand what community means. If it weren't for Blue, I wouldn't know that community doesn't predicate itself upon nice. You don't have to be polite to want your neighbors to have food in their bellies before they go to bed that night. You don't have to be professional to want the unhoused folks in your neighborhood to have shelter and warm clothes during a frigid winter. You don't have to manage your reputation to give a damn about the person beside you. And in a state where nice is the focus instead of kind, Blue was a saving grace. It's through fair love that I learned what it meant to have a village and to be a villager. My oldest and best friend, Anna, summarized community, friendship, and kindness all in one small phrase that I live by to this day. If I got nothing and you got nothing, you can have some of my nothing. In a time where I was the most alone, I turned to a community that I didn't even know I had. And not only did that community expand over time, it grew kinder and gentler as we grew kinder and gentler. The people in my life are always welcome to have some of my nothing. And it isn't just my friends, it's my neighbors, my family, the people I see in the world around me. They're welcome to some of my nothing. and they're always deserving of my kindness, and in turn I receive kindness and a piece of their nothing. That is what community is. It's people doing their best every single day to be kind and to care for one another, not for optics, but just because they're doing the hard work every single day of being better people than they were the day before. Community is kindness, community is internal, community is effort, and community is worth it. In Mayfair, the wider London community does seem to work together more seriously than the society of Mayfair does. This is best seen in the fourth season. Fair warning, I'm going to be talking about the fourth season for a bit, so skip to this timestamp if you're not interested in spoilers. Season 4 of Bridgerton starts with Benedict being a full tilt rake all over the ton, having threesomes and drinking the night away like the carefree second son he is. Lady Bridgerton calls him to the carpet and demands that he shows up to her ball, a masquerade ball, the first of the season. Being irresponsible and a little drunk, he shows up late after a hookup at a random bacchanal. At the ball, he notices a lady in a silver dress and mask staring up at a chandelier in wonder. They connect and flirt and spend time alone together in a gazebo on the Bridgerton house grounds. Right before midnight, when she's supposed to take off her mask and reveal herself, she kisses him and vanishes into the night, leaving behind only her glove. Benedict is smitten and starts his search for the lady in silver. He draws her, he seeks, and he hides all of this from his mother. While Benedict searches, the real lady in silver, Sophie Beck, is working as a maid in Penwood House, and the Dowager Lady Penwood, Araminta, has been giving her hell as per usual. She hates Sophie without remorse, and Sophie finally confronts her about it, which ultimately gets her fired. Araminta promises that Sophie won't be able to find work in Mayfair ever again and throws her out onto the streets. Her daughter, Posy, rushes out and gives Sophie some of Araminta's shoe clips to sell for money to get her by. Sophie sells the clips, which had fake gems, and only gets enough to get a stagecoach ticket. Meanwhile, Benedict goes on a bender, forlorn, thinking that he'll never find his lady in silver. He ends up at the same house where Sophie eventually finds work and rescues her as she and another maid are about to be assaulted by the owner of the house. Benedict and the predator get into a scuffle and both maids end up fired. Benedict offers to bring Sophie back to Mayfair and get her a job, but as they're heading in that direction, it starts to rain, and they detour to a mansion of Benedict's called My Cottage. They spend some time there as Benedict got a nasty stab wound from his fight with the predator and needs to be nursed back to health. He and Sophie spend lots of time together, separately and in quite close quarters, leading to them falling for each other. When they do finally make it back to the Tun, Benedict reveals that the job he got for her is at Bridgerton House. They will they won't they for a while and finally hook up. In the throes of passion, Benedict asks her to be his mistress, and she leaves, stunned. Sophie starts looking for new work because she has some very valid concerns about hooking up with nobility. Her mother was a maid, and she's technically illegitimate. Being the mistress of a nobleman is something she promised herself she would never be. Hey guys, Editing Alex here. As I was editing, I realized that I forgot a couple of events in the timeline, so I'm gonna catch us up now. Sophie avoided Benedict as much as she could after that point, and she was focusing instead on finding a new position, but they found themselves meeting again and again, and eventually ended up arguing in Benedict's room. That devolves into them declaring themselves, and they hook up once again. Sophie ends up losing her mother's necklace in Benedict's room and runs off in the morning because she is a maid and has stuff to do. During this time, Benedict tries to sell Sophie on the idea of the two of them living separately in Benedict's mansion, My Cottage, and he draws her a cute little picture and everything. It's very adorable. Sophie's friend, Alfie, tells her about a position with a family that's planning on moving to the Americas, and Sophie ultimately decides that that's the position she's going to take, and she's ready to leave, leaving Benedict and her mother's necklace behind. But before she can take the position and meet the people at the docks, Araminta gets her arrested by the cops. We should be caught up now. I'm gonna drop you guys back into the video. Okay, bye. After a vicious search by her former mistress, Araminta, Sophie is arrested for theft and impersonating nobility, just as Benedict finds Sophie's necklace and realizes that she's the lady in silver he's been looking for this whole time. He and Lady Bridgerton come to her rescue, and she's released into their custody. The Bridgertons and Sophie work to find what Sophie's father wrote in his will, and find out that Araminta stole Sophie's dowry for her daughter Rosamond and was getting paid from his estate yearly for keeping her. This shows that Araminta stole from Sophie and would ruin her in society, just like Sophie's illegitimate birth would ruin her and the Bridgertons. Araminta is trapped by her own malice and status, and has to confirm the lie that Sophie is a distant relative of the late Lord Penwood to the Queen, or risk losing her status in Mayfair. Thus, Benedict and Sophie are free to marry in the eyes of the crown and of society. This season is the one that openly speaks against how society functions. There is ultimately no critical rallying against the demanded performance of society. Rather, the main characters bend and lie to hide safely within society, despite being open about the fact that society is in and of itself a gilded cage.
Society should not be allowed to dictate the rules of how one lives life or who one loves.
The servants of the idle rich in Mayfair operate more communally than their employers. This is seen when Sophie is looking for a new position after hooking up with Benedict the first time. Her friend from her old employer, Alfie, mentions that he knows of a position at the employer's house under new management, but Sophie puts off going to the position and ends up missing out on it. When Sophie loses her mother's necklace after hooking up with Benedict, another maid in the house, Hazel, asks what it looks like so they can try and help her find it. Alfie comes again with another position, one that would take Sophie to the Americas. Hazel also runs interference with the chaperone footman when Sophie wants to talk to Benedict after being bailed out of jail. Sophie even has forewarning that her old employer Araminta is out to get her because Araminta's daughter Posy sneaks out to deliver the message to her. This is sharply contrasted by the way the new Lady Penwood and the Dowager Lady Penwood act. The new Lady Penwood shows the return of Cressida Cowper, but stick a pin in that. Araminta, the Dowager Lady Penwood, and Sophie's evil stepmother in the Cinderella story of season 4, is cruel and deceitful to everyone that she meets, including her staff and the Bridgertons.
That Penwood woman, she made working here seem like a holiday. I was only going to the countryside because she came home tonight in a foul mood and dismissed me.
She only plays nice if it means she or her favorite daughter, Rosamond, might benefit. But she isn't a truly kind person. At every available opportunity, Araminta twists the knife to show how much she hates Sophie. She blames Sophie for every ill that has happened to her, and tries to justify it with her own grief. In the end, Araminta is hemmed up in an impossible situation that relies heavily on her complying with the word of the Bridgertons and leaving Sophie alone, which grants Sophie the chance to marry Benedict without societal exile and judgment. Araminta and Cressida are neither communal nor kind. They're nice in the eyes of society because they perform according to society's rules. But no one in Mayfair is fooled. Not the servants, not the other members of the elite, and not the Queen. No one is fooled by their act. And it's remarked upon often how cruel these women are. They have no care for anything other than optics. No care for actually doing the hard work of being kind people. They instead choose to focus on the easy work of maintaining their reputations. And this focus on optics, on being seen as good, on fitting into the rules of society, this is rewarded by the narrative, no matter how little they may deserve that grace, because they have the wealth and status needed to afford them close access to the Queen. They are protected within the ranks of society. A part of me wonders how Araminta and Cressida would fare in my neighborhood, how they would fare in the real world. If they were born privileged like they are in Mayfair, would they still be more focused on optics in the real world too? Would they focus more on being seen as nice or good? Would they even consider kindness? I doubt it. One of the things I've noticed living on the West Coast is that people who are born with privilege tend to move more selfishly, with the focus being on the way that they're perceived and the way that they feel rather than the results of their actions and behaviors. Society demands that you appease it endlessly by managing your impression. that you hide behind your performance in order to let it speak for you. It's a way to self-soothe in a world that's especially vicious. But Community asks that you approach it earnestly, that you show your heart, put forth the effort of kindness, letting your actions speak for you. In this especially vicious world, it's a way to show real, tangible love. When we do the work of managing our impressions, being the actor of Goffman's theory to the audience of the world, there is always a chance that someone will see through the performance, especially when the performance we put on causes harm and is done specifically to maintain our reputations. Community handles performance a bit differently. Your reputation is much less important to the people of your community. Your character is more valued. Your performance can even be called into question or used to call you in, especially if you're hurting yourself or others. Impression management will only take you so far. If the performance of, say, disability advocate suffering from his disability directly harms the audience of perpetually racialized Black actors being honored, who is actually being helped by the posturing? When we hurt others, who is helped by doubling down and focusing on our reputations and egos instead of righting the wrong done?
This is what happens on a regular basis in society, and we're supposed to just move on from it, but there's impact, and there just really needs to be an understanding of why this happened and accountability.
The performance doesn't satisfy the victim of the abuse, it doesn't help the aggressor grow and change either, and it certainly doesn't mitigate the harm caused. The only person who walks away from the harm feeling better is the aggressor, not because they actually did anything to help the situation, but because they satisfied the demands of their societal performance. They acted for the audience, and they didn't have to do any of the uncomfortable work of realizing the ways they hurt someone else. So the performance self-soothes, but ultimately serves no other tangible purpose. It's purely selfish and completely transparent. The victim can see through the performance to the ugly core underneath that both parties know is there. This takes the responsibility for mitigating the harm from the aggressor and places it on the victim, demanding that they perform perfect victim to maintain any kind of charitable consideration. This perfect victim holds no bitterness or anger in their hearts or actions and will loudly forgive the abuser, that is, wave their actions away as acceptable. This is done not just for the abusers, but also for society's comfort. This perfect victim performance makes it okay for abuse to continue because no one has to sit with the discomfort of the victim's hurt or anger and society's own complicity by way of silence and demands for impression management. Nothing changes. No hurt is healed, but people can move on comfortably, leaving the victim holding the weight of their own trauma. I bring up the disgusting racism that Delroy Lindo and Michael B. Jordan experienced because this is a perfect example of what I mean. The disability advocate, who I won't waste my breath naming, suffered from an attack at the award show. And that, in and of itself, is not the problem. The problem is how he responded after the fact. Instead of apologizing for the way the slur affected the men being honored for their incredible work, or the other two Black people he disrespected intentionally or not, he doubled down on refusing to apologize for having Tourette's, which wasn't the problem to begin with. His focus was managing his impression, that is, maintaining his performance of the put-upon victim of ableism instead of the unintentional aggressor against people differently marginalized than he. His performance of victimhood soothed his fragile ego, but perpetuated harm against Black people and Black art. A simple admission of harmful impact, regardless of intention, would have me singing a different tune, but there was none. The advocate didn't think the people he harmed deserved the respect of him stepping away from his performance. He didn't think they deserved the respect of his honest care and effort. He didn't deem them worthy of basic communal kindness. Which makes me think of Cressida coming back from Wales and demanding to see Penelope before she hosted her first ball as the new Lady Penwood. would. In season 3, Cressida found herself in a rough spot after being out for 3 London seasons with no proposals of marriage. Her nasty father arranged to have her married off to someone old enough to be her grandfather, an unhappy fate for any young woman. When the Queen penned a letter offering a reward in exchange for information about Lady Whistledown's identity, Cressida tried to take credit for the salacious sheet. Of course, Cressida couldn't actually back up these claims and lost the favor of the Queen and any chance of getting that reward. In an act of desperation, Cressida tracked down the true identity of Lady Whistledown. When she figured out it was Penelope, she sought out the writer to blackmail her. Give me the same amount of money as the Queen's reward,
or I will reveal the truth to the entire ton.
When Colin appealed to her better nature, he quickly discovered that she didn't have one. Cressida's desperation turned to greed, and she doubled the amount that she was asking for, along with wanting a glowing review in the Whistledown papers. This ultimately led to Cressida being banished from society by the Queen and expending any and all goodwill that could have been granted to her by the Bridgertons or Penelope. She was shipped off to Wales, and that was the last of her in season 3. In her return in season 4, she visits Penelope to present her the opportunity to write about the mysterious Lady Penwood, and frames it as a favor. She doesn't actually acknowledge the cruelty she's always given Penelope until after Penelope calls her bluff and stands firm. Cressida performs her role of charitable Lady of the Ton up until the point where the ugly core of her behavior can no longer be ignored. Cressida was put in a lot of impossible circumstances by everyone around her. It does make sense that she's been so vicious. It does make sense that her petty victories seem worthy of a lack of apology. However, she also did real harm to others, regardless of the reality of her circumstances. Penelope didn't deserve to be backed into a metaphorical corner just because Cressida had been. If anything, Cressida should have understood just how impossible circumstances like that are. And were Cressida a kind person, that would have engendered in her a community focus that would easily have borne sweeter fruit than her failed attempts at blackmail and false generosity. Likewise, the disability advocate doubtless has contended with many an impossible circumstance. That should have made him all the more cognizant of the impossible circumstances of others. Instead, he focused on what made him feel best, not on the ugly core of his behaviors and their painful consequences, just maintaining his performance as victim, as good, as nice. The reason I made this video is because of this post coming across my skyline when I was in the middle of my season 2 rewatch. My quote of the post was an observation that I've been noticing more and more in my time as a TTRPG enthusiast and as a resident of the West Coast. Optics seem to be the focus instead of honesty. People want to look like good people without actually doing the work that being good people requires. Who ultimately benefits from this petty and perpetual focus on optics? Who benefits from people extending no real effort while cosplaying care? The power structures at play, patriarchy, classism, and the delusion of white supremacy, demand that we maintain nice instead of kind, demand that we maintain optics instead of implementing action, demand that we manage our impressions instead of rolling up our sleeves. This is shown even in Bridgerton. The debutantes are debuting in front of the Queen, the literal final word in power in the country. She's the one who determines if they've appeased society enough because she is society. She's the gaze that they have to appeal to. She knows nothing about these young women or their character. She sees only their performance. In Daphne's case, she takes a single look at how Daphne carries herself and curtsies, then deems her the diamond of this season with no knowledge of who Daphne actually is as a person. The focus in Bridgerton is the love stories. It's a period romance drama, but it is also something to note that England, especially during this time, are arguably the largest colonizers in the world. The crown is the active force behind all of this colonization. This is what's going on in the background of the swoon-worthy declarations of love and titillating gossip sheets. The arrogant and bloodthirsty brutality of colonization. The people who have the power to stand up against the crown's destructive actions are the people of Mayfair, those with the money, proximity, and access to do the actual heavy lifting in this world. They're a force the crown pound couldn't actually stand against if they were going dollar for dollar. Instead of focusing on the community of London, and by extension the community of the world writ large, the people of Mayfair strut and promenade and debut for the entertainment of the Queen, who is in a gilded cage herself. Instead of righting the wrongs of colonization and severe wealth disparity within their larger community, they maintain polite for the approval of the Queen and the rest of the ton. The people who serve to benefit most from the general public posturing and preening instead of connecting and building are those who benefit the most from the status quo remaining exactly as it is. Like the Queen, she remains in power while her subjects parade in their finery for her to judge. This is mirrored in the real world too. Poor and middle class people don't own the means of production. They might be petit bourgeois at best, yet they pretend and perform in order to mimic the people who actually run the world we live in. They act according to the rules of society in hopes of one day making the rules. For Black people specifically, this performance is demanded at all times, and it's never enough. I mentioned a bit earlier that the powers at play include patriarchy, classism, and the delusion of white supremacy. These systems dictate that Black people, Black culture, and Blackness as a whole are diametrically opposed to what society deems as proper or good. That's built into the fabric of these power structures themselves, a topic for an upcoming video. Subscribe if you want to see that one too. This demand comes through in every liberal talking point. Jordan Peele's Get Out references this beautifully. The family in Get Out wants so badly to look like they're safe for Black people to be around. They happily talk about how they're not racist whatsoever, how they loved Obama and would have voted for him a third time if they could have, while actively squeezing Black people out of their own bodies and wearing their skins like costumes. Living on the West Coast, I know for certain that this is not a sensationalized and hyperbolic Hollywood plot point. This is a realistic portrayal of a typical white liberal. How many times has a Black woman's justifiable frustration been written off as her being an angry Black woman? Why is her anger taken as a reason to dismiss her instead of a cue to listen to where she's coming from? Why does discourse about race rely so heavily on being nice instead of honest? Who does that ultimately serve? How many times have Black people been forced to swallow their own pain to placate the white gaze? The people who perpetuate this harm against the Black community swear up and down that they're not racist, yet the conversation always shifts to their comfort instead of their reprehensible offense. And if the victim of the harm shows even an inkling of anger or frustration, they're written off immediately as having deserved it. And that focus on optics has an ever-growing body count. No matter what, as a Black person, all the world's a stage, and we are always under the ruthless heat of the spotlight. We must always perform niceness, politeness, and professionalism to even be listened to. We can never just be completely honest about the impacts of our shared marginalizations. Society rests on all of our collective performances, and isn't it all just exhausting? Doesn't it get exhausting for liberals to constantly focus so heavily on their feelings over their harms? Doesn't it get exhausting managing your reputation over putting forth actual effort to back it up? Doesn't society get exhausting? I know it does for me. I know it does for my skinfolk too. To be Black in this world means being under a brutal microscope at all times, with the arbiters of society slavering for a chance to rip us to shreds for not being polite. Polite serves up comfort for those in power without actually moving the needle of progress. That's why racism is still in existence. If white people truly wanted to dismantle the delusion of white supremacy, it would have been dismantled already, because they would have put in the work. The racists of the world are entirely fine with a liberal focus on comfort and optics, because it means they can continue to operate unchecked. There's a reason this current administration is being compared to 1930s Germany, without mentioning whatsoever that 1930s Germany was based on chattel slavery. There's a reason that ICE is now the SS instead of the slave patrols, and that focus on optics is why the needle of progress has not moved. If anything, we've regressed. Purity politics means that anything less than perfection doesn't fit into society's schema for change, so nothing gets done. Instead, the focus is on the charade of civility and less on the parasitic destruction of the colonizer class. All this preening and posturing does is obfuscate the true issue. The inability to listen without self-centering is the reason the mask has come off for those in power, and nothing is being done to fix that. It's just being quietly swept under the rug because the truth makes people uncomfortable. Comfort and optics over change and effort. Simple answers to complex problems. Uncritical self-satisfaction without the slightest bit of elbow grease in the world we all share. Pretty dresses and handsome dukes instead of critical commentary and active rebellion. The truth is that change isn't comfortable. It isn't enough to have a committee in your office or So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo on your bookshelf. Oluo wrote an article in 2019 about how white people come to these discussions she leads with a predetermined focus on how they'll engage with this space. They aren't coming to these spaces to actually critique their reality and be honest about their impact. They're coming to make more Black friends or to feel like they're different from their openly racist counterparts. These discussions are more about how they feel than how they act. It's more about their optics than their honesty. That's why little has changed in 400 years. Why for every step forward, there are 3 loud reactionary steps back. There's literally a term for it: white lash. White lash is why fascism is at everyone's doorstep. For Black and brown people, it's always been here. It's just reaching white liberal backyards now too. There has been an expansion of open racism, so there's another side to the coin. Now it's not just open racism. Now it's quiet racism too. Open racism hangs nooses in high school lockers and mocks murdered Black men with costumes and t-shirts. Quiet racism shouts the hard R at an award ceremony honoring a piece of Black art and uses disability to justify it without apology. Quiet racism makes excuses to deny and ignore Black pain. Quiet racism unironically uses microaggressions like angry Black woman as an excuse to discredit. Quiet racism says recognize an ally and tone polices instead of engaging with the reality of the frustration. In either case, open or quiet, racism is racism. A pointed hood is a pointed hood, whether it's on your head or in your closet. No matter how you hide behind your optics, your actions show the truth. So why? Why not just be honest? Why not be open about the fact that there's still work to be done? Why not join an actual community trying to make a difference instead of maintaining a broken society just because it's what you're used to? Why not expend your effort for something bigger than yourself? Do you truly want change? Or do you just want to look like you care? In Bridgerton, Daphne is forced into a marriage with Simon because her reputation would be ruined otherwise. Antony is heartbroken that he can't be with Sienna, his opera singer lover girl, and instead rejects the idea of love for a whole season before Kate challenges him. Benedict is left hiding his bisexuality in lavish parties and having to use subterfuge to marry the woman he loves. Penelope is shunned by society, so she makes her money mocking it and judging others, perpetuating the same harm done to her and her family by everyone else. Lady Bridgerton has to involve her housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, just to have a rendezvous with her lover, Mr. Anderson. The Queen herself is terrified of being alone after the love of her life passes away, but must maintain a stiff upper lip in order to keep up appearances. And through it all, the crown brutally colonizes while the ton promenades. Nothing is done. Impressions are maintained. Everyone acts. Everyone is the audience. No one is free. Optics is self-serving. It focuses on personal comfort, and honesty is hard. It focuses on external effort. Both take energy, but only one will actually make a difference in the world. Society is reliance on dishonesty and comfort. Community is reliance on honesty and effort. So, do you want to be in community or just maintain society? Do you want to love the maid without derision, or do you just want to entertain the queen? At the end of the day, Bridgerton isn't going to be the media that completely shifts the conversation from optics to honesty, from society to community. Bridgerton is just a dramatic period piece with a penchant for showing man-ass. There's commentary there, but it's as vapid as the drama. People aren't watching Bridgerton for revolutionary thought, and there's nothing wrong with liking a silly little Regency show. But it does beg the question, why maintain something that serves no one and confines everyone for the benefit of a cannibalistic few? Change doesn't come comfortably. It doesn't come with photo competitions at No Kings protests. It doesn't come with pussy hats on Harriet Tubman statues. And it doesn't come without effort. Revolution doesn't begin with Ijeoma Oluo's book. It begins with honesty. It begins with truth. And it begins when you worry less about your reputation and more about your impact. It's hard work to maintain your reputation. It's also hard work to make a difference. And it can feel daunting to even take a step in the right direction. But everyone has the ability to make a difference. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. The hard work of being a good person is worth it. The hard work of building community is worth it. The hard work of honesty is worth it. We're at a tipping point in 2026, and time is quickly running out. We can't primp and preen our way through extinction. Yes, it is that deep, but like Andre said, y'all don't want to hear me, y'all just want to dance. And while a quadrille is more fun than challenging society, the community of the world is waiting for you to try. For real this time.